I've been receiving this question a lot in the last few years, not just in the comments, but also on other social media. It surprised me because I thought this had been covered quite thoroughly in the past, but then I realized that I've been playing these games for like 7.5 years and making content on it for the last 5 or 6 years, obsessing over it daily. And there are obviously a lot of people who have only just come in later on. So in this video, I'd like to put together a quick timeline on what happened to the military in the days following the outbreak. Before I jump into the story, I just want to clarify a few things. Those not familiar with this, especially those not from the United States, there seems to be a little bit of confusion around some of these terms, so I'm just going to quickly clear these up. Military is a word used to refer to the entire armed forces. The word army is just one subset of many branches within the military. Within the US, the other arms of the military include the Navy, Coast Guard, Marines, Air Force, and Space Force. A person who is on active duty is in the military full-time. They work for the military full-time, may live on a military base, and can be deployed at any time. Persons in the Reserve or National Guard are not full-time active duty military personnel, although they can be deployed at any time should the need arise. The Posse Comitatus Act is a United States federal law which limits the power of the federal government in the use of federal military personnel to enforce domestic policies within the United States. It bars federal troops from participating in civilian law enforcement, except when expressly authorized by law. The Act applies to the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and Space Force. The Act does not prevent the National Guard under state authority from acting in a law enforcement capacity within its home or state, or in an adjacent state, if invited by that state's governor. The United States Coast Guard is also not covered by the Act, primarily because although it is an armed service, it also has a maritime law enforcement mission. Martial law in the United States refers to times in which a city, region, state, or the whole United States is placed under the control of a military body. On a national level, both the US President and the US Congress have power, within certain constraints, to declare martial law. Some of what I've talked about here is actually more complicated than this, but for the nature of this video and the division story, this is more than enough for understanding their purpose. Banknotes coated with variola chimera, a highly contagious smallpox strain now called the green poison, are circulated in New York City. Within days, the emergence of disease symptoms sparks a devastating contagion that sweeps through the city, overwhelming medical facilities. In response, the federal government's Disease Control Division and other authorities swiftly declare a state of emergency. However, the rapid spread of the disease renders containment efforts futile. The National Guard is called upon, leading to a complete lockdown of New York City. Roads are blocked, public transport is suspended, and cross-town travel is prohibited. The populace is mandated to take shelter in their homes, while all businesses shutter their doors. As dawn breaks on the following day, New Yorkers wake up to a hauntingly quiet city. Sarah initiates a large-scale vaccination campaign utilizing available stockpiles to combat the contagion. Initially targeting first responders and key areas of transmission, the focus soon expands to inoculating the general public at various locations like clinics, workplaces, and parking lots. Amidst the eerie calm, a semblance of normalcy returns as stores cautiously reopen during limited hours and people are allowed on the streets within strict curfew regulations. Sarah establishes field clinics across the city, providing supplies, antiviral medications, and protective gear to the population. Additionally, a centralized mass treatment facility for severe smallpox cases is set up within a sealed-off 6-zone in Midtown Manhattan, surrounded by a reinforced perimeter wall. Sadly, within a matter of days, two grim realities emerge. Firstly, it becomes evident that the existing smallpox vaccine is ineffective against the new virus strain. Secondly, the relaxation of movement restrictions inadvertently accelerates the spread of the disease, leading to thousands of new cases and a devastating wave of fatalities sweeping across the city. The outbreak is officially declared a global pandemic by the World Health Organization, prompting the president to invoke nationwide martial law. In New York, dwindling supplies of food and necessities led to the emergence of black markets and smugglers seeking to exploit the situation. Civil unrest becomes apparent as looters defied curfews, posing threats to hospitals and stores. Fear and anarchy infect the city, with panicked New Yorkers attempting to flee and clashing with troops enforcing quarantine lines. The streets descend into lawlessness. Outnumbered and overwhelmed by mob violence, security teams reluctantly withdraw from chaotic neighborhoods. The surviving police and military units unite to form the Joint Task Force. The JTF informs a complete lockdown of all 5 boroughs, tightly controlling the movement between them. While this facilitates safety management on a citywide scale, it intensifies the challenges faced by the teams operating in Manhattan, the most densely populated and severely affected borough. The pandemic spreads to Washington, D.C., triggering a rapid escalation of civil unrest, fueled by the sensationalized media coverage of the chaos in New York City. Public services break down within 72 hours. So what actually happened to the military? It was during and following these events that international trade shuts down, creating a food and security crisis as the pandemic spreads around the globe. Suffering from a broken chain of command, mass desertions, and death due to the virus and attrition through fighting to maintain order, the United States military is thrown into crisis. As the civil unrest and chaos escalated following the green poison attack, desertions from military, law enforcement, and other first responder units became common. The shocking street savagery, combined with concern for loved ones, motivated many deserters to evacuate. The real-world event that happened recently showed us how vulnerable the military really is to biological attacks. Enlisted single soldiers live in tight housing and tend to congregate together when they have free time. It was during this time that there was a lot of free time, and soldiers ended up spreading the disease quickly through the ranks. Summing up, the chain of command has collapsed. Ranks were ravaged by the dollar flu due to the close-quartered living situations. Those who were able to get back home to assist domestically after martial law was invoked continued to get thinned out due to the severity of the chaos, dwindling support numbers, and concern for loved ones, leading to mass desertions. Those who are still active have for the most part joined with the JTF. I believe there are still pockets of military units that were cut off overseas, but also within the US itself. I imagine that there are a number of smaller towns that may not have a JTF presence at all, so the soldiers in these areas may be holding things down on their own. However, I still think most who are able to fight will be with the JTF, if anything, just to take advantage of the infrastructure they've been able to put in place. And then, of course, there are a number of these JTF who would later become true sons, but I think we all have a pretty good idea of how the story plays out. I think we need to remember that the premise behind the division is fairly straightforward. When all other measures have failed, they are the last line of defense. In the world of the division, the military has been decimated, and is now no more than perhaps a few isolated units with little to no leadership keeping them connected to each other, with the rest of them now deeply ingrained into the JTF. I actually quite enjoy the excuse to go back so many years to revisit scripts and recordings. I often find myself coming across pieces of information that I hadn't noticed the first couple of times, or in some cases didn't seem all that significant at the time. So, people who are maybe a little newer to the franchise, did this help you with understanding what happened to the military? And did you have anything else from around this time that I could possibly round up for you? Let me know in the comments, or Twitter or Instagram. I may not always respond, but I read every single one of them. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Extremis Malus, Extrema Remedia.